He also informed her that the movers had been instructed to move her essentials to her new house, and he would appreciate it if she would try to be a little more cooperative and a little more appreciative of what her family was trying to do for her. My God. He also informed her that she would not need to be present when the university would take possession of her house, as she had already signed her power of attorney over to Seamus, and that he would take care of everything, including the deposit of the $13 million into her bank account at First Capital Savings Bank. Deirdre had no recollection of signing any power of attorney. And though she checked her balance regularly at First Capital Savings Bank in Kingston, the money never appeared. When she asked Seamus about the money for her home, he said she was very lucky to have such a smart son who knew all about the ins and outs of capital gains, and she would have paid a fortune in taxes had he not moved all of the money to a special fund in the Cayman Islands, where it was safe and gaining interest every single day. He didn't believe his mother would be safe having all that money in her savings account with all of the investment sharks that were preying on elderly people. Deirdre did her best to make a life for herself at 79 Knob Lane in Hickman's Mine, New York. It was not easy, and her friends who came to visit her were appalled at the neighborhood she was now living in. Deirdre volunteered at the local hospital and became active in the local family service agency, assisting young unwed mothers. Deirdre was very personable, and so she made friends wherever she was planted. She made friends with her neighbors and the local children who would come to her for her home-baked chocolate chip double fudge cookies and the thrilling stories she read to them. Her own children hardly ever called and rarely visited. When they did arrive, it became clear within minutes that they were looking for something, and that something was usually money. After 11 months, Seamus and Patrick came to visit her together. They explained that they had to move their headquarters to Boston because it was there that the bulk of their clients were located, and that they had given a lot of thought to her current housing situation, and they had finally come to agree that her home at 79 Knob Lane indeed was in a rundown neighborhood and not befitting a woman like her. The rooms were too small and made one feel claustrophobic, and that she was located too far from them and from her friends. They were moving her to Boston, and they were taking her with them. They informed her that they had already put up her home at Knob Lane for sale and had been lucky to have already found a desirable buyer who would be taking possession of the house in 2 weeks. They also said that they agreed amongst themselves that the burden of having her own home was too much for Mom. And they were looking at other living options that were far more suitable for her. Deirdre became alarmed. She had learned that her children would do what was good for them and not for her. They told her that they'd picked out a very lovely nursing home for her and that she would be moving there in 1 week. Deirdre was exhausted dealing with her manipulative and money-grubbing children. There was no end to their selfishness. The lovely nursing home that they had chosen for her was the run-down, dilapidated LaRouche Hotel. When Deirdre arrived and saw the pitiful surroundings, she cried for a week. Eventually, she had gotten used even to that and spent her time helping others and making recordings for the blind because she was now in show business. Seymour finished telling me Deirdre's story and said, "Can you imagine having 2 piranhas like that for children?" I shook my head in total disgust. Don't ask me how, but Deirdre somehow learned or figured out that Seymour had told me her story. She took my hand and said to me, "Herbie, you know, don't you? You know about Seamus and Patrick and what they did to me." I nodded and said quietly, "Yes, I know." She sighed. "You know, Quincy said they were bad boys, and unfortunately he was right. I never wanted to agree with him, but their behaviors have shown me that indeed he was right. I'm embarrassed that my womb produced 2 dishonest scoundrels like the 2 of them, and I'm sure that they are doing the same stuff to other people. I mean, if they would cheat and lie and steal from their own mother, can you imagine what they are doing to total strangers?" I said nothing. "You know, Herbie, they think I'm an old fool, and that I don't know anything or understand anything. They are wrong. They will find out how wrong they are. Deirdre thought for a moment. You know, after Quincy died, I received a sealed letter from his lawyer. It was from Quincy. No one knows about this letter. Only me, and now you. The letter is about what happened with his partner, Darcy Crowe, and the involvement of the children with that business. I want you to come up to my room and read his letter. I've hidden it in a secret place. I followed Deirdre upstairs, and after rummaging through her closet, she produced a long handwritten letter. The letter detailed how Darcy Crowe had lied about the deals Childers and Crowe had offered to the public, how he had distorted earnings, how he had simply made up numbers, and how he had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from unwitting victims. The letter specified corruptions of fact, altered profit, and lost documents, and which deals were kosher and which were not. The letter also outlined how Quincy had worked like a fiend to replace the funds and to make the investors whole. Quincy had threatened Crowe to turn him in if he ever suspected he returned to his dishonest practices. The same held true for his sons, who were deeply involved. In the final passages, he realized that if he predeceased Crowe would certainly return to his thievery, and he instructed Deirdre to bring his letter to the office of the Attorney General and to the leading Wall Street publications so everybody would know what Crowe and his sons were doing. Deirdre handed me the letter and said, I want you to bring this letter to the right people, and by the way, when they open up the books of Childers and Crowe, you can be sure that the files will reveal the rampant fraud, deceit, and thievery of Darcy Crowe and my two sons, Patrick Childers and Seamus Childers. The deception and the stealing must come to an end. Enough is enough. Don't lose my letter, Herbie. The very next morning, Deirdre was late for breakfast. I went up to her room to make sure she was all right. I found her lying in her bed with that sweet smile of hers on her lips. She had passed peacefully during her sleep. I did as Deirdre had asked of me, and there was an immediate massive investigation of all of the dealings of Childers and Crowe. Innumerable criminal offenses were discovered, and after almost a year of fierce legal battles, all three of them were sentenced to 10 years in prison with no possibility of parole. 1 week after Deirdre's funeral, I received a phone call from her lawyers, Sullivan and Fitzpatrick. They wanted to meet with me. They handed me a sealed envelope, and inside was written the following: My dear Herbie, you have been a good and true friend to me. I've always valued you as a person. You remember that I used to remind you to get yourself a good girl as a companion? Well, I realized that you probably wouldn't find someone if you continued to be a poor waiter at the LaRouche Hotel. So I'm leaving you 2 small pieces of property. One is a 363-unit apartment building on the corner of 7th and Hawthorne, and the other is a 414-unit apartment building at 1079 Victory Gardens. Herbie, I would have been very proud to have had you as my son, but continue to be a good boy and continue to make me proud of you. Signed, Deirdre Childers. Deirdre taught me a lot about character, gave me my start in real estate, and in an odd way even helped me to find my lifetime companion. Because on the 3rd floor of Victory Gardens, which became my building, lived a single woman who was studying to become a nurse, and her name was Nancy Schaefer. When she came to pay her rent, I was immediately smitten. We've been married for 1 year now, and Nancy is pregnant. We know it is going to be a girl, and we immediately agreed that her name would have to be Deirdre. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.